Welcome to episode number 2 of the Student Success and OT podcast, where we are diving into the evidence about OT and higher education. For today's episode, I want to paint a picture here. You're a brand new college freshman, just out of high school, right? Everything's changing. You've got classes, dorm life, figuring out laundry.
And don't forget budgeting, that can be a big one too.
Exactly. You're juggling a million things. It's overwhelming. So tell me, Dr. K, how do you look at this student from an occupational therapy angle? Don't all students go through similar experiences? What does an OT do with students who are new to university or college or living on their own for the first time?
Occupational therapists are all about examining what people need or want to do every day. Early on in my work with college students, I developed a 5-week intervention with a group of OT students purely focused on this transition. What might need to be supported for students to adjust to university life? Each week, we tackled something essential to their adjustment.
Okay, like what?
Good question. First, we had students rate the things that they were most interested in and most interested in doing well. We created modules that covered these plus others. Our final group sessions addressed leisure, sleep and rest, budgeting and time management, and social participation. These were identified challenges for students during that transition period to university life.
Leisure? I wouldn't have expected that on the list.
It might seem surprising, but think about it. Students who over-focus on academics might lack balance. Leisure, believe it or not, contributes to mental health. It's one way for students to re-energize themselves. Leisure can also be a bridge to identity development, which is a big focus during the time between adolescence and adulthood. Exploring leisure helps students explore themselves, what they like, don't like, and what they are good at. It also gives them an opportunity to meet new people who can further expose them to new activities and people. It can be in these moments where students can meet new friends and intimate partners as well.
That's interesting. I guess my mom kind of experienced the same thing when she had a stroke. She needed OT to help her find balance too. Like, they worked with her not just on chores, but on actually enjoying her hobbies again.
Exactly. That's a great example, Tim. Occupational therapy doesn't just focus on functional tasks. It's about meaningful ones. For these students, that might be finding a club they're passionate about or just learning how to take breaks without guilt. All of that plays into their resilience, adaptation, and identity. Plus, leisure activities that are done with others help students feel less lonely.
Okay, I gotta admit, it's making more sense now. So they come to these sessions and what? Walk me through how it's structured.
Each week we kept things pretty practical and interactive. Say, for budgeting, they'd learn how to make a basic monthly plan, covering rent, groceries, and even the little stuff like coffee runs. This tied into leisure as we had the students find cheap and free leisure at or near campus that they would be interested in. We took this one step further in the social participation session where we helped students make dates with a friend or new acquaintance to do an activity that they found. For sleep, we looked at patterns to spot late night habits that might harm their schedules, then introduced strategies to fix that. We kept the groups active so that they could get practice doing these occupations and learning at the same time.
And these are all small groups, right? So they're learning with their peers?
Yes, the group format is intentional because the shared experience creates this amazing support system. Many struggles in those first few months transition naturally into group discussions, helping them realize they're not alone in it. Plus, we did have some people report back later that they became friends with other group members they didn't know before we had the group.
Wow, it's funny how the simple stuff, like sleep or learning to budget, can make such a huge difference in mental health and stability.
Absolutely. These are foundational skills. Once they're developed, students can build on them for years. Studies show that good habits that are formed through these foundational skills during adolescence and adulthood follow people into middle and old age. Basically, learning healthy routines and habits as a young person can influence both physical and mental health.
Speaking of building foundational skills, you mentioned earlier this tool called the COPEEM. Can you explain exactly what that is?
Yes, the Canadian Occupational Performance Measure, or COPM, is a standardized tool we use in occupational therapy to measure how people feel about their ability to perform daily tasks and how satisfied they are with their performance. It's highly client centered, which means the person identifies what's most important to them. I use it a lot with students I am working with.
And occupational performance? What does that cover? Sounds like a job thing to me.
Not quite. Occupational performance is broader. It refers to the things people do in their daily lives, whether that's cooking dinner, studying, or even socializing, really anything meaningful in their routines. OTs refer to occupations as the things that people want and need to do. Performance satisfaction, on the other hand, is about how happy they are with how they're doing those things, those occupations.
Got it. So, how does the COPM fit into this research with freshmen?
We used it to track the students' progress. Participants in the studies self identified areas they felt they were struggling in, rated their performance and satisfaction, and set goals. Then, right after the 5 week group, and again 18 months later, they rated those same areas again. The results showed statistically significant improvements in both performance and satisfaction in both the short term and long term.
18 months is a long time, so what's that saying?
We can't say that our study influenced these results that far into the future, but in addition to using the COPM again, we also asked the students to reflect on the skills and strategies they learned during the intervention. And all the students mentioned a few lasting skills that they learned during the groups, and that these had lasting effects on their ability to manage and feel good about their daily lives. But of course, the outcomes varied. Their living situations and whether or not they were working at the time played a big role.
Interesting. I imagine living on campus versus at home could be a game changer.
Absolutely, Tim. Students living on campus tended to have fewer barriers in some areas, but those living at home might rely more on family support. The dynamic is different, and it influences their needs and how they apply what we taught them.
So, were there any challenges in interpreting this data?
Oh, definitely. One limitation of this study was the small sample size, which makes it hard to generalize. Plus, the data came from self reported scores, so there might have been a bit of bias there. How people perceive their own performance doesn't always align with what's objectively happening.
Yeah, I can see how that'd be tricky to work around.
It is, but even with those limitations, the trends in the data were clear enough to show that this approach has real potential. It's an encouraging start.
So, Dr. K, you mentioned this is an encouraging start. What's the next step for this research? Where does it go from here?
Great question, Tim. This was an early study, almost like I'd call it a proof of concept. It showed us that occupation centered strategies have the potential to make a real difference, but there's a long way to go. For example, this study had a small and relatively homogeneous sample size. Future research needs to broaden that scope, reaching more diverse groups of students at different types of universities.
Okay, so this was kind of just the tip of the iceberg?
Exactly. What's fascinating is the way these strategies can potentially enhance both mental health and academic and life success. Skills like time management, budgeting, balancing academics with personal life, they're not just helpful in school, they're life skills. And that gives us a great opening to think about integrating these interventions into higher education.
So, you're saying this could be scaled up? Like instead of a pilot program, it could be part of how universities function day to day?
That's where I see the most promise. Imagine if modules like these were embedded into freshman orientations or even offered as part of a required first year course. Not only are you normalizing mental health support, but you're also setting students up with practical tools they'll use throughout their lives. It becomes preventative, not just reactive.
Right, because it's addressing issues before they spiral into bigger problems. Makes sense. Is there a particular area you're thinking deserves more focus?
Well, something as simple as improving social participation could have a massive ripple effect. Students often think they're the only ones struggling, and that isolation can snowball. By fostering connection, and not just academically, but socially, we could see even greater benefits to their mental health and resilience.
Got it. Listening to all this, it hits me how much of a game changer this might be, not just for students, but for how universities approach support services altogether.
It really could be, Tim. That's why continuing this research is so critical. We need more studies, longer term ones, that evaluate outcomes like retention rates, mental health benefits, and life satisfaction years down the line. There's tremendous potential here, but we've only scratched the surface.
Well, Dr. K, I gotta say, I came into this thinking OT was mostly about like physical rehab. But wow, these conversations have opened my eyes. Thanks for walking us through it today.
It's been a pleasure, Tim. Occupational therapy is all about supporting people and living their best lives, and university students are no exception. If we can give them the tools they need when they most need them, the impact could be tremendous.
And that's all for today's episode, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in. Take care. Until next time.